Just so I don't forget.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. You've got your kids today, Elizabeth? Yeah. So cute.
Yeah, I do apologise. There's not much I could do about this one.
Don't apologise.
Yeah.
No need to apologise. What's that about?
No. It's all changed now, expectations, that kind of stuff. I'll have to leave at 3:30 to take one of my girls to the park. So, yeah, such is life. Now, where's my glasses? That's what I need.
Elizabeth, did I hear you say that the cafes are still happening at the moment?
Yes, they are. They're all online once a week. And we've got 5 cafes going now. And we quite amazingly opened a Dementia Cafe online in Sorrento, which on the end of September they became our 5th site. But we're working on some structures at the moment, partnership structures, so we can help other organisations set up cafes and act as a consultant role rather than run them ourselves, which seems to work in regards to empowerment and engagement for local communities.
Yeah. And
I think it's really hard not to place ourselves in the community as if we're the authority. So if we're following the lead of the local community, it tends to be a lot easier and actually more respectful. So we're practicing that with Sorrento, and it looks really good. The volunteers are a bit more skilled, and there's different types of volunteers in different roles. So we're working with that, and we've got employees in regional positions rather than cafe coordinators specifically. So we've got
funding. Sorry, I got your name wrong, Kirsty. I thought I looked at Elizabeth's name. And
oh yeah, no, that's okay.
So yeah, because there was a bit of a lack in Southeast. I know I referred that client in Rowville, and she thought it was all a bit too far. But anyway, now I think that the technology is a deterrent for some of these people. So yeah. It'd be nice when we can do face-to-face stuff again, won't it?
Absolutely, Maria. I think we're working with our partners at the moment for capacity. So whether we do them more frequently, like weekly, and have 2 different groups running every fortnight, or we have different locations, which both of them is a cost neutral, is the same cost either way. It just depends on what the community want. But I would say it'd be better to do one out Rowville way, closer.
Yeah, that's where I am, yes. Is there any thought to, and I know this is a big thing, people are from cold communities, like is there any thought to setting up ethno-specific sort of dementia cafes? You'd have to get on board with the Greek, with Frondido or Pronia, because I mean, look, I have a lot of Greek clients. There's a huge need. And I recently took part in the Moving Pictures project. I don't know whether any of you were aware of that.
No. Is that historical?
It was a NARI project, the National Aging Research Institute. Yeah. They're putting together this thing called Moving Pictures, which is sort of a short kind of movie around in a number of different languages, educating people and normalising the experience. And there was the launch a couple of weeks ago, and I was actually invited to take part, wearing the role of a carer, because my mum had dementia. Yeah. But it actually got written up for a magazine, Insight, Australian Insight, INSITE. I don't know if any of you are aware of that. Yeah, you are? Yeah. I just found out that there were all these errors, so I just spoke to the lady, the reporter that phone interviewed me, and I think she's trying to correct it now. But anyway, that's all right. But yes, so what was the point I was making? About ethno-specific sort of.
It will be. I absolutely think there's potential there. We want to watch this trial that we're doing with Sorrento, because it fits perfectly into the concept of doing cold communities. because then that's us following your lead rather than you following us and coming under our, management structures. So that will become a big part of end of 2022. I would say. We're sort of rebranding almost, because the last 2 years we've got skills that we didn't realize or anticipate we would ever envelop into the business. I mean, we're such a face-to-face charity. To be able to go online like we have has been a massive achievement. All our education and volunteer training, our staff training. I just employed someone through online interviews, and she's working in the cafes, and I still haven't met her. So I think this is really a massive step. I think 2022, 23 is going to be huge for us, because I think we can probably branch out to regional communities in other states if we get this right. So bear with me, Maria. We've got a brand new board coming in as well in this next month, just because the 3 years is up for our first tenure group. The first 3 years tenure is the commitment. So we're busy putting them together, and the board really do point us in the right direction. So it would be interesting to see the personalities, how that influences us. But I'll put it out there. We're looking for 3 more sites in regional Victoria. And that's been hard for us to find, out there, like Shepparton and Bendigo, Ballarat, Geelong, places that are a long way away from our head office areas like Blackburn. So if anyone knows anyone who thinks they might be set up to do a dementia cafe, community houses would be ideal, then please get in touch. Yeah. Anyway, there's my little promo, Sarah and Elizabeth.
That's great. Beautiful. All right. Well, I think we've waited the obligatory 6-7 minutes at the start. Thank you, everybody, for coming along. I would first like to respectfully acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, who are the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, and pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. So welcome to the Dementia Knowledge Network for October. Today, our guest presenter is Sister Lorraine Testa, who is a pastoral care practitioner at VMCH, working within a residential aged care setting. So Sister Lorraine is a highly multicultural professional, and this informs her pastoral care practice. Sister Lorraine has also just completed a graduate certificate in ageing, which is a newly constructed course that focuses on the care and pastoral care of the aged. So I will throw over to Sister Lorraine. Thank you very much for coming along. And just a reminder that we are recording this session. So if anybody doesn't want their face on the recording, feel free to turn your camera off. Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Thanks for this invitation to speak. Look, it's not going to be highly professional, okay? It's going to come from experience. And yes, as Elizabeth did state, I am informed by my background, by the bit of study I've done. So what I'll do is I'll just go through it, and hopefully at the end of the session, if you want to open it up and discuss amongst yourself or ask me questions, I've got the answers, you've got the questions, I hope they match. Okay, so I'll just start the screen sharing if you don't mind. I'm not sure, do we have that? Not sure, do we have that or not?
Yes, we do.
You do? Because I can't see. So what's the word? It's really hard. I'm not sure how many of you have got experience with the CALD. I heard the conversation that was going on beforehand. And yeah, it's a big thing when dementia hits. So I'm hoping that I'm pretty sure you've all had some experience with people from another language. Or perhaps you are one of them yourself. I'll give you a brief rundown about myself, only because it informs what I do at the pastoral care level. Right, so how I got here. I'm an Australian born with a Maltese heritage and bilingual. But having said that, it doesn't mean that I was speaking the language all the time. In fact, my grandparents who lived close by, next door, and my auntie across the road, they were always speaking Maltese. And so I was immersed in it, as were my siblings and my cousins. But I wasn't speaking it. They would talk to me in Maltese, I would respond in English. And that was the pattern for many, many years. Also, I had the privilege of having my grandmother from Malta who knew absolutely no English when I was 13. She lived with us for a year, and I was grateful that she helped in my language competency and even taught me how to read the language. As a religious sister, I had a posting in Italy for a year, and I also had a posting in Malta for 2 years. So the posting in Italy was very traumatic at first, because I went over with absolutely no Italian. I did not know the Italian language, only because I didn't think I needed to learn it. But as soon as I got out of the aeroplane, this big fear came over me, because I didn't know the language. And so I thought with the whole dementia thing, it really goes back to the point, when you don't know a language and can't express yourself, you can't express your thoughts, and you can't express your history, you can't express your person. And it's something that always comes to mind when I am speaking to people of another language, most particularly those with dementia. I'm not sure how many of you were pre-70s schooling. We weren't encouraged to speak our language. Post-70s, we became Multicultural Australia. And I remember at Teachers College, I was really not told off, but asked, well, how come you don't know your language? My response was, well, previous to this, we weren't encouraged. So I had to quickly value my language. As Elizabeth said, I've had 34 years in education, 16 in leadership, moved into aged care, and realised that my language competency is always being tested. Why do I say that? Because at St Bernadette's, where I do work, there's a high percentage of CALD persons, especially Maltese, which we have 76 residents, and of those, there would be about 42 Maltese speaking, followed by 15 Italian. Then we'd have Polish, Spanish, Croatian, Macedonian, and English speaking. So I've once again immersed in other languages. So what is all this about? I believe, and things would say there, that language and communication becomes more difficult with people living with dementia. I think you know that. I don't think I'm telling you anything different. But it is important that we use patience and allow time for people to hear us and to respond to the requests. I'm guilty of the action of not having the patience to wait for the person with dementia to find the right word. I put my hand up to doing that. But as I grow into pastoral care in aged care, I am finding that I'm slowing down. I am using more picture cues and signage and body language and symbols, which, as this quote says, are important to provide people with the opportunity to have their needs understood. This is highlighted in aged care and through cafe clubs, and through parents and through interactions, that a poor understanding of dementia combined with cultural stigma leads to the denial of the condition and or delayed diagnosis. I remember within some cultures, it is a stigma to have dementia. When my mum, just before my mum passed away, she was making cues or talking in code, I think it was, now in retrospective. She was saying things like, oh, Dad needs help. You know, he's taking such a long time to do this. It's really frustrating that he can't, you know, this type of code. It also reminds me of a woman called Phyllis, who had no idea that her father had the beginning of dementia because her mum didn't tell her. She sort of covered it up. You know, and she only realised when her mum died of cancer and she became the carer. Now, why am I saying this? I'm saying this because in the Maltese culture, you know, dementia isn't handled very well. Not handled very well at all. And so, you know, I'm really interested in the point made out before the discussion that, you know, the Untitled Cafes would be a really good idea. Because they're really, people from a Untitled background are really stoic. I found through my experience in aged care that, you know, I'll do this by myself, I'll take care of it. Well, it's really hard to take care of it, especially if you come from a Untitled background. Your literacy skills perhaps are not up to scratch to even deal with the paperwork or to access support groups that, you know, and to access all the good stuff that there is. I'd like just to show this brief clip here to inform what I've just said.
I've become the parent and she's become the child, and that's about the only way I can describe it.
نعمل كل شيء من غير ما نسألهم أحيانا لأنه ما عندهمش خبر شو في أكل بالثلاجة، شو في بضاعة يعني أشياء شوبينج موجود في الخزائن وفي شو عندهم لبس شو يلبسوا شو.
Sorry.
يعني يخلعوا ما عندهمش خبر، بقينا إحنا نعاملهم لا مؤاخذة يعني مثل الأطفال.
Suddenly the person you've known for years, I mean, is changing in front of your eyes, and things that he used to do, enjoy, doesn't do it anymore, or you tell him something and then just, you know, they forget, like, you know, the next day or what you're talking about.
كتير شغلات تغيرت بحياتي أنا شخصيا يعني بقدم لها الرعاية. مثلا زي ما قلت لك كنت أشتغل 5 أيام بالأسبوع من 9 ل5. كل هاي الشغلات صرت أشتغل مثلا 4 أيام من 8 ل6 7 بالليل. بعدين صرت أنزل كمان اشتغل 3 أيام بعدين لمدة 5 سنين وأكتر. إنه حتى أعمل بالانس أنا كمان بحياتي، إنه ما أضل بالبيت معها. تغيرت حياتنا كلها. يعني مثلا
الحمد لله 3 بنات وياها عايشين، فأظن يعني موفين يعني هالشي. طبعا وفاميلي أختها هنا هم منه يعني على طول تزورها وتتفقدها وتهتم، يعني هي مجاملات وحب ومراعاة نفسية ويعني والكازن كلهم تقريبا يعني.
هي أختي بنت أختي ابن أختي يعني يساعدوني هواية، مثلا دكاترة مواعيد، مثلا موقت إذا واحد دكتور سبيشال مثلا أنا ما أعرف أحكي إنجليزي أو شيء، يعني كل شيء يساعدوني.
When they come and they are overwhelmed with all this, because it's again the pressure between balancing from the family member and the patient who has illness with dementia. So we see the carer are struggling a lot to balance between their family and the extended role, which is a carer for her.
Okay, so I think the points made from that short video clip was that family and extended family really become important when you have a person from a CALD background who may have or who has dementia. That there is the expectation, as I said before, in some cultures, that the family and the extended family jump in to help. My studies have shown me that bilingual people living with dementia often improve if carers can communicate with them in their original family, in their original language. I can categorically agree with this. Even my educational background confirms that this is really important. That when a person has another language and they're exercising that language, it's much better for their brain and brain activity. So how much better it would be if we can get to a point of encouraging those with dementia to use their language. But how much better it would be if their carers and their surroundings promote this language. Again, I'm calling on your experience. Have you seen this in action? I know at the aged care facility, and even with my dad, the more I speak the language, the more alive the residents become. The more they can delve into their word bank, and the more conversation they make. Let me introduce you to my dad. There he is. He looks pretty good there, but he's hiding the fact that he does have dementia, and there are times that he uses, as you would know from all your experience, all the cues and all the word substitutions and all the ways to cover up the fact that I've forgotten the word. If anything has helped us with Frank, my dad, is that in lockdown, when COVID began, he was living by himself after my mum passed away, and we tried so hard to get him to move to my sister's place, and he wouldn't do it. He was too proud to admit that, hey, I can't do this. So eventually, when lockdown hit, he came across, not because I need help, he said, because I won't be able to see you at all. Thank God. And he was very, like he played soccer when he was young. He was a barber when back home in Malta. Family is really important to him. But we can see that he has deteriorated. It's that initial shock that we came to when Mum had passed away. So every day we grieve the lost word, and he's grieving the lost word. Because he sees, and he's told us, and even the CALD people within the aged care facility have told me that every word is one more flag that they're losing control. Things like words, lexicon like that thing, the thing that turns around, it opens, things like that. So English isn't my dad's first language, this says, and he forgot the word for pimple, so he just looked at me and pointed at my forehead in mild alarm. I thought that was it was funny, but how true it is. Those CALD people, they're always looking for visual cues, more so, to help them. They're talking their language, they have to translate that language, then somehow find the right English word, which they've forgotten, and then somehow process that in picture cues, in body language. It's really tiring for them. And I might add, it's tiring for the carer. I'm not underestimating the fatigue that overtakes a carer trying to not only make sense of the English word, but make sense of the language. Now, to make sense of the language, what of those language people, the people who don't have that language? It's getting, as I said, it's getting harder and harder to understand the subject. When he mixes things like, in the black, he says this, Naksep are going shopping with Sanistri. Nakseps are going shopping with Sanistri. Now, my younger brother would not know what he's talking about because my younger brother doesn't know the language, does not know the language. Because he's younger, he's 9 years, he's the youngest of us all. By the time he grew, everybody lost their language. His peers had no use for them. He just does not know the language. Okay? So what does he do? My sister is becoming more and more anxious and depressed. And caregiving, which I'm not saying, I'm not saying anything new, is a 24/7 job. Luckily, because she's the eldest, she has the luxury of knowing the language very well. But still, she has to try to figure out what my dad is saying, first in Maltese and then in English. It's really hard. Let's go into this next clip.
To an overseas country to be closer to her family after her diagnosis of dementia. But what her family forgot is that this displacement into a new country where she knew no culture or no language was terrible for her. And so the other one, the last of the fifth story, it's my tailor, as I call him. It's the Polish gentleman I got to know through my work with Migrant Resource Center in Tasmania, who reverted to mother tongue, but still spoke fluent German, Croatian, Italian, and so on. And yet, poor man was totally not understood in the nursing home where he lived. This is the problem that is so dear to my heart, people who are not understood.
I'll just stop it there. As you can see, that's a clip from the conference that was held this year. You can access this on YouTube. And it's very, very interesting. She made a point, this woman made a point about that man who knew all the languages and then still wasn't able to be understood in the aged care facility. When people revert to their first language, they often also revert to the memories in their past language and talk about them. I think one pertinent experience I had was with a woman called Lucy who has lost English and always speaks Maltese, and many times starts screaming and shouting and doesn't allow people to touch her or to attend to her needs. And one particular day I was passing her room as this was happening. So I went in and asked and tried to help the carers, and they said, I don't know what she's saying. Well, I knew. I said, just please step back from her, give her time, because she's reliving a trauma of domestic abuse. And she was reliving that, and she was reliving that in her Maltese language. And so reliving it in her body almost. Now, how do the carers had no idea. And so that brought me to the point to say, well, I need to have a quick toolbox and teach and make carers aware that sometimes the behaviour you're seeing in another language by a person may be a relived trauma. And so CALD is really, it's to always be aware, if you don't know the language, read the body language.
To an overseas country.
So it's important that we not see bilingualism as part of the problem, but as a potential solution. You know, with Lucy, the solution was, you don't need to know the Maltese language. Read the body language. Step back. Step back. And then go to all the hundreds of resources there are. You know, I use Meaningful Aging or Dementia Australia or Cultural Diversity, which I'm sure you all know about. Those who know more than one language should be encouraged to use them actively as much as possible. In the case of grandparents, this could be a double effect of building up their own cognitive reserve. You know, as I said, younger generations need to learn again or recapture again their language. Again, we've got language sheets in the facility, and even with my brother and my nieces and nephews, I encourage them to use Google Translate. And it's an aid that I would encourage everybody to use Google Translate. That we get in there with our iPads or iPhones and we have a conversation. We have a conversation with Google Translate. And it's amazing. The residents, and even my dad, he comes alive. Bilingual people living with dementia often improve, I think we've said that, if we can communicate in their original language. I'm not sure the carers or the home care programs, how many people, how many workers do have a second language that are matched up. This is an activity we had at our residency. We had an olive tree we have an olive tree in our residency, and so I said, right, we're going to cure olives. And that afternoon, there was Maltese and Italian going on across tables. Did they understand themselves? It wasn't each other. It wasn't important. In the end, the language was not important. It was the action. And we had Maltese and Italians teaching each other how to cure olives. And it was great. Another time, it was a matter of making Maltese soup. Again, the language. Just how do you do it? And I got a Maltese recipe book in Maltese, not an English Maltese recipe book, a Maltese language recipe book, which they read and translate and then went ahead with their activities. So really, that's all I have to say. But what I am passionate about second languages and first languages. I don't think it's beyond anybody these days, not with the technology we have. Absolutely not. Before we used to, scratch our heads and say, I need a translator. Ideally, we could have a translator. But, boots on the floor, we don't have a translator. So what do we do? I was fortunate. I was immersed in the language. And so I learnt it. I encourage my younger brothers, to get onto the Maltese language shows, have the Maltese language in the background, even in cafes. And I don't mean in a disrespectful way. Sometimes, and I see this happening in our aged care facilities, sometimes we put on, ethnic specific music, we put it on, and then we walk away, tick, we're okay with the CALD. We're not. We're not. How do we connect that music to their experiences? It's not just a matter of putting on a song. How do we connect it? That's what CALD dementia persons need. You know, Laurel and Hardy clip with a really good, they're dancing an Italian song. And when I put it on, I always get the Italians up with their walkers to sort of walk around the steps. Okay? They walk around the steps. And yes, they crash into each other. It's like, you know, the go-karts where you're crashing. It's like that sort of. But every crash, they come to life laughing. That's what I mean about using resources, not just to ease our conscience, but to really engage CALD-specific residents. And, you know, like my dad. Yeah, my dad, you know, if I want to get him going, I'll put on a soccer match. You know? And I'll put on a soccer match from Malta because he connects with the spectators and how unruly they are. They are worst spectators in the world. Okay, they get so aggro. But that's what he remembers because he used to play soccer and he did really well and he used to coach. That's what CALD specific work is. And with Google Maps, I was able to pinpoint his soccer club in Malta and bring him to that and let him talk about that. So as I said, it'd be great if we've got specific CALD language speakers, but with the internet, you know, we can dig into it. What I've learned from carers is that they are very resourceful people, very resourceful people. So what I'd like to do is encourage them, you know, take on the CALD. Take on the CALD. You don't have to learn the language. You know, I go down the corridors of the aged care facility and I say, bonjour, and the French woman says, bonjour, madame. I go down I pass another one, the Croatian person, I say, dobro. And she, dobro, you know. Or the Italian, buonasera, like, just do it. Mm-hmm. That's where I'll stop, I think, Liz.
Thank you. No, that was great. Very inspiring. A lot of really good messages there. I was thinking, and I'm sure you personally, Sister Lorraine, probably deliver some of this type of education to direct care staff in the facility that you work in. But is there a disconnect potentially between the tools and knowing how to use them for a lot of people?
There is a disconnect because it's hard. It's a hard job. You know, what do? You've got so many minutes to prepare a person. Do you have time to say, oh, dobro, or buonasera, or, you know, it's, unfortunately, we're still working on a hospital mode, okay? But even hospitals are changing to become person-centred. You know, there is a disconnect, but slowly, we're making inroads. But I think we're making inroads, and it's a hard slog. It's a hard slog. You know, we talk about, you know, we're just coming out of a COVID lockdown. You know, you've got the mask, you've got the goggles, you've got the PPE. Can you be bothered? Can you be bothered doing the CALD stuff? And let's not forget, when we've got the goggles and the face masks, the residents can't hear very well. Even my dad, you know, his hearing is gone. He's got macular degeneration. You know, so that's all impacting on our cognitive ability and the dementia story and the dementia progression. You know? But, you know, thank God, Maltese are very loud. So my dad, we can be loud to him and he doesn't think we're shouting at him. okay? Because we're loud people, okay?
And I guess I think just to kind of circle back on that point about the disconnect between the tools and knowing how to use them, perhaps the best message, which I'm sure is what you push as well, is knowing the person. Because I can think of some examples of people who the staff don't necessarily speak the same language, but they are familiar with either a certain body language or a time of day or a a phrase that the person keeps repeating, and learn about what that means to the individual, how best to respond.
Exactly. And I agree with that. We have a woman 9 o'clock every morning and 3 o'clock every evening. She comes on her walker and she's got a pile of clothes. And she's Maltese. And she happens to be a person who lived around the corner from me at my own home. So I'm saying, I want to get the bus. She says, I want to get the bus, all in Maltese. Enrique Muradar, Amy Muradar. And we start conversing. So I quickly, say, the buses don't come to West Sunshine. You remember when we stayed the other day? Do you remember how bad the bus service was at West Sunshine? And then she would say, yeah, it was terrible, and we'd converse it that way. So, yes, there are carers and we are trying to get to know them as well as we can. But knowing the language helps.
Can I just say, Lorraine, just to support what you've been saying, when my mum went into care, she went into an Australian facility for 3 years, and they used picture books, they learned a few words, but then when my dad had to go into care, I put him in a Greek facility, and then I transferred mum, and the difference that it made to mum being able to understand, look, not that all of the staff were Greek, they had a lot of non-Greek staff, but it was more just the music, the culture, and the music, that was something for me that I know that mum would remember, and the emotions associated to songs. So one of the ways that I would spend time with her and dad when I'd visit is I'd start singing some of the old songs, and I knew those songs were just so strongly connected, like her father's favourite, and she could sing. She could actually remember the words better than me.
Of course.
And then sometimes she would cry, and sometimes her face would light up. So yeah, look, I'm bilingual. I grew up, I came out to Australia. Greek is my first language, but I came out when I was 7, and I've seen the value. I've got a lot of Greek clients, and just being able to speak the language, and it's different using interpreters than being able to have that direct communication, because it's more just interpreting the words. It's the whole, the cultural nuances and all of that. So yeah, and look, how do we go about this? I mean, it'd be great to have ethno-specific facilities for every cultural group, but it's not practical. But as you said, even the odd sentence like, come sta signora, that my Italian's really not, we had some Italian friends years ago, I probably know a couple of phrases, but just trying to enter their world and try to understand them and just share something that is familiar with them. So yeah, no, I agree with everything you said. And I was, how you showed that, the Arabic, I was involved in the Greek one of that.
Right, good. Thank you. Right, that's good.
I was interviewed both hats on. So I spoke as a carer, but then I spoke as a professional as well. Yep. So if you look at the Greek one, you'll see me in that. You can't see what I look like now because I haven't got a camera. But
I'll have to look you up. I think also I was with a woman yesterday, and she was I do speak Italian proficiently, and I was speaking with her, but she was speaking in dialect, and that's a whole different type of thing. Yeah. So we can't just presume we know Italian. We have to presume, we have to know what dialect. So there's there's that on top of it, so. Yeah. It's a maze, but it's a great maze to be part of. It's a great maze. I mean, I love it. I love it. Yeah. And we make mistakes, and hey, sure, we laugh, and like that's it, But I say now that I have, I know English, Maltese, Italian, but I know a fourth language, and that's called Dementia Language. The Dementia Language. With my dad, it's The thingamajig. I know that the thingamajig for him is he smokes.
Yeah.
Okay? So that's the other language I'm learning. And you have to learn. Okay?
Yeah.
So you don't say, oh, that's wrong. They're your smokes, Dad. They're your smokes. Oh, yeah, you want your thingamajig? Let's get it. You know? Let's get it. So we don't want to put people down if they can't remember the thing. Learn their language. You know, I always, when I did a bit of teaching graduate diploma in pastoral care, and I always used to tell my students, don't go with my flow, go with their flow. Don't go with the flow, go with their flow. They are the most important people. Go with their flow. And if their flow sends you left instead of right, well, you've learned to go left. Congratulations.
Mm. Okay. Can I just make another comment in relation to what you said about the Maltese community and that they don't cope well with dementia? Well, I found that, I think a lot of communities, but my parents were actively involved with their church, but when Mum got dementia and they stopped going to church, no one bothered to check in on them and see if they were okay or they needed support. And then when Dad relinquished care, he became severely depressed, and I thought I'd ring the local priest and just say, look, can you provide some support to my dad? And that I actually said, look, I'm really disappointed. No one's actually bothered to sort of follow them up and see, well, where are the Stephanoos? How come the Stephanoos haven't been to church for a couple of years? And you know what he did? Now you're going to laugh at this. As a pastoral care worker, he rang my dad and he basically said, well, what are you concerned about? He goes, look, all you need to do is put on some Greek music and dance. I was furious.
I need to say our community, our church community have been really good, but it's true. It's true when you say your friendship circle gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Okay, absolutely. And, and sometimes with families, one experience I had is I had to go away and my other sister stepped up, but as soon as I came back, she stepped down.
Yeah.
All right, so there are all those family dynamics and and that's with any, I think that's with any, that's not Maltese-specific.
That's what I thought, as a sort of a pastoral person, his advice to my dad was, well, you just put some music on and don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And I thought, my goodness.
That's why it's up to, cafe clubs and what you're doing and conferences and to get into multicultural support groups and do it that way.
Does anybody else have a question for Sister Lorraine in that presentation? No?
I just wanted to ask, sorry, Kirsty.
Oh, sorry, Sarah, you go ahead. I can wait.
I just wanted to ask, you were talking about the lady who was reliving a trauma in the aged care home. As I'm a person who only speaks English and no other languages at all, do you think it would be more important for me as a worker to read her body language in the moment or try and work out what she was saying in the moment?
No, read her body language. Read her body language. This woman, as she was reliving this trauma, her body went rigid. She'd hitch to tell people to go away. She'd do this, and that's all body language that is related with trauma. It's all language that, this defensive, hide me, think, hang on a minute, You don't need to know another language to know the body language of, I'm defending myself.
Yep.
Another woman, she, whenever she saw a baby, she'd cry. She said, tell her in her language, in the Maltese, she would tell me, ask her if she's all right, ask her if she's all right. And she would cry, please tell her to sit down. And then when I worked it out and I sat with her, she was really scared that the pregnant woman was going to have a miscarriage because she'd had a miscarriage. Okay? So, I'm blessed. I do say it is a blessing that I know the language because I can get to know a lot of the people's life stories. But then it's incumbent on me within the you know, the framework of privacy, to give as much support to the carers as I can.
Yep, thank you.
Kirsty?
Okay, Lorraine, sorry, I'm getting distracted in the background because I
Right.
just want to go to the part. I know that just from my perspective, we run Dementia Cafes, and a lot of our members are in the first instance just diagnosed. Having said that, we've got cafes that have been going for 5 years, so we have, you know, we have people who have reverted back to their natural tongue or their native tongue or tongue. And so what we've had experience with, and it was completely organic, is that volunteers who speak that language, we have generally sat beside them, or other couples. So we've got through it that way. But just going forward, I wanted to just sort of have a strategy response to this. I know that Manningham does a memory lane cafe, and they have a cold day, or cafe days, Dementia Cafe days. I'm assuming they bundle all the different cultures together and then have topics on that, you know, Italy or Vietnamese or China, you know, whatever their clientele is. But in regards to our organisation, would you suggest that we had Dementia Cafes specific to those cultures and actually harness, you know, mould them to be, say, directly Greek or Chinese? Or would you suggest actually this can be done relatively well with a little bit of education and awareness in multicultural cafes?
You know, I'd be inclined to say, first of all, is there any way you can tap into the multicultural organisations like the Italian, like COASIT or the Maltese Community Council, start that way, or invite them in? Like, you could even use their facilities to do some education, because I am sure that everybody would be screaming out for your cafes.
Yeah.
Kirsty, but they don't know how to go about it. Like, I know, for instance, the Maltese Community Council, they, when pre-COVID, you know, they would bring people into their facility at Royal Parade. Now, if you could talk to them and say, well, can we use, you know, what about your community? Can we use it, your facility, and then go off to there? Because I think that would be very interesting.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think that'd be very interesting.
You could overlay that relatively well on a strategic point of view too, because our guys have been in the cafe for long and they've established relationships. But of course, as the dementia progresses, so does the language changes. That doesn't mean we, you know, don't love them any less. I just
no.
My volunteers struggle to, and they do keep the communication through body language and the learned relationship over time. But we in Sorrento, we have a very strong, two strong people who are Italian backgrounds. And so they connect incredibly well, which is beautiful. But I've got a feeling that this might be something we have to respond to as their dementia progresses. But it's in Sorrento, right? So it's not like you can get, you know, the Italian called I'm sorry, I don't know the peak body, but to
COASIT. It's COASIT. Yeah. They have their head office in Fitzroy, I think. But they're all over the place.
Okay. This is probably the awareness and education that I'm looking for, actually. But to visit that Sorrento, you know, environment, that cafe when we open, that'd be cool. Yeah. Okay. That's just planning. That's not particularly difficult. And I wouldn't have thought that our volunteers would be adverse to that. I quite love it, actually, because they love hymns and love them both, actually. So, yeah, cool. Sorry, Lorraine, thank you for that. That answers one of my concerns. Thank you.
Molto bene.
Grazie.
Prego.
Anyone else have any questions for Sister Lorraine? No? Thank you so much for your time and your presentation. Something that I really took from it was, I think, your encouragement to us and to everybody working with anybody with dementia in whatever capacity, to not just throw your hands up in the air and say, well, I don't speak that language, but to actually try and connect in different ways. So whether it's using Google Translator, whether it's using, you know, the moving pictures type ideas, whether it's using picture cues or visuals or reading body language or music or talking to people who come from the culture, I think that's really encouraging. There is always something that we can try.
There is always something. And if you've got an opportunity to engage secondary students, I haven't even touched on that, you know, who are learning that language. You know, they could come in, Kirsty, and be part of on a volunteer community outreach, like they usually have it on Wednesday. The VCAL students, you know, use them.
That's a really good option, actually. I like that.
We use VCAL students.
Started a relationship with them just before COVID hit. Obviously, that got cancelled. So, yeah, that's a really great option. And they're older too, which means they'd probably be vaccinated. So
yes, we've got to think of all of that. Yeah. I'm about 3 minutes away from another meeting, so
thank you very much. Really,
it's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks.
If you've got any other, like, if you want to contact me, just go via Elizabeth. She's got my email address. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll put it in the chat. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good on you.
Take care.
Sorry, I have to leave. Another meeting. Bye.
Thanks for organising this, Sarah and Elizabeth.
Thanks. Thank you, Sarah, Elizabeth. Bye.
See you guys.
I will quickly just put Sister Lorraine's email in the chat for anyone wanting it.